Mermaids, half human, half fish, something of myth and legend, something that seems completely absurd and could never have actually existed, right? Well, think again. Meet Animal Planet, American television channel devoted to documenting nature and the world of animals, who in 2012 decided to pose that very question with a new documentary. A hypothesis that while we were evolving from whatever this is to Homo sapiens, something was happening in the depths of the sea. A new branch of evolution occurred, resulting in a humanoid being that was adapted to live in the ocean, what you and I might call mermaids. This is obviously a massive lump of pseudoscientific bullshit. It's called the aquatic ape hypothesis, so it wasn't an original idea on the behalf of Animal Planet. Despite this, it still managed to be the network's most watched piece of programming, garnering 1.9 million in viewership and fooled many who watched it, to this day being cited as one of the many big broadcasting hoaxes and television controversies. The documentary begins by discussing the bloop, a mysterious sound coming from the ocean that was recorded in 1993, alongside mentioning the fact that
in the early 2000s, it was proved that the Navy beached whales while testing sonar weapons.
Both of these things are true, but neither of them prove this theory whatsoever. The best way to tell a lie is to mix in small elements of truth, so these factual statements might seem like compelling pieces of evidence to the average Animal Planet documentary viewer. The only thing separating these from complete lies is the fact that people may have heard of these events before, or a quick Google search may deem them true, although if you really go deep into it, it can be found that, while there's no evidence that sonar weapons lead to whales being beached, it actually seems to happen quite a lot of the time. So the time it did happen in 2000 couldn't have been that strange or unusual. We then are given information from officials who were supposedly there at the beaching, stating that these whales were bleeding and had damage to their internal organs, before finding the sonar had somehow caused some sort of blunt force trauma to the whales. This bloke then picks up some sounds that sound very similar to the bloop mentioned earlier. Quick reminder that we're 10 minutes into the documentary and there's no mention of mermaids or the aquatic ape hypothesis, and all we've experienced so far is a collection of arbitrary, vague, meaningless pieces of evidence. Then, a conspiracy theorist against the US Navy emerges, in which they claim there's something deeper going on to do with this sonar test, based on a piece of very manufactured footage taken at a naval facility that was determined to be genuine, because I suppose that's enough to be believable. The footage is incredibly dark, blurry and hard to make out, making sure the mermaid fin, or whatever this is supposed to be, doesn't look too fake. An anonymous person then claims the Navy has denied this video's authenticity, and fair enough, it looks like shit. And if it was real, who filmed it? It couldn't have been someone working for the Navy, and if it was someone else, how did they break into a naval base? Anyway, despite this, they claim that they have seen a creature like this in the possession of the Navy, and it's bizarre statements with no real backing that you're gonna see a lot of in the rest of the documentary. Eventually, they go on to mention that alongside the bodies of the whales, they also found spears. They interview a fisherman who claims he'd had experiences of his own with fishes with spears in their sides. They all of a sudden mention that they have a recording. They don't specify where they recorded it, obviously, and then go on to decode it, comparing it to sounds that were made by dolphins and sharks, making the case that whatever this noise is, it's too complex to be made by either animal. With all these pieces of evidence laid out, we are left with a question of what does it all mean? What hidden truth is this documentary about to present us with? Well, this is when the hypothesis begins and things start to get really, really weird. The aquatic ape hypothesis is explained, with the first piece of evidence being that we as humans are more adapted to swim and be in an aquatic environment than other land animals, which is a product of a common ancestor of humans being an aquatic mammal. This is true. One big part of our evolution was an early form of life, moving out of the water and slowly adapting to live on land. But when fact-based scientific observations fizzle out and pure speculation begins, is the claim that at one point in our evolution, an early form of human went back into the ocean and adapted into a new species. It's theorised here that some early humans stayed on land while others went into the ocean for food. Then we go back to talking about whale beachings and the Navy conspiracy again, this time regarding a different beaching that occurred in South Africa. It's at this point where the documentary gets really boring and repetitive, using the same evidence again and again. I guess it's supposed to be a cohesive pattern of events that lead to the same theory, but it pains me to be watching this and not even be halfway through, and we're doing the exact same thing as earlier of playing an audio clip that sounds mysterious. This time there's also dolphin sounds present, supposedly to make us believe these creatures are being hostile once again to actual aquatic life. They then recall discovering a big bag of unknown body parts that we're of course meant to believe is from one of these creatures. A lot of time is spent analysing these pieces of evidence, coming to the conclusion that because the anatomy of this creature doesn't align with other ocean-dwelling species, and has the ability to communicate with dolphins, it must be an intelligent form of life similar to humans. Just in case the audience isn't convinced enough, we flash back to the hypothesis again, where the documentary takes another strange turn. We actually see these mermaids in action, making friends with dolphins. An uncanny CGI depiction of them is shown, adding to the low quality dodginess of the whole film, as well as making it even more unbelievable that people actually thought it was real. It's these poor looking graphics that have become synonymous with pseudo-scientific documentary programs, particularly in the US. It's popped up quite a few times in meme culture, citing similar networks like the History Channel for airing very weird programming late at night, shows like Ancient Aliens that make all sorts of outlandish claims like aliens building the pyramids. It's very telling of how commercial and unregulated American TV channels are. Over here in the UK, the BBC, as a public service broadcaster, that is state funded, would never get away with broadcasting something like this. The last time they barely did get away with it was with Ghostwatch, a drama framed as a live documentary that sought to prove the existence of ghosts. It was banned from ever airing again as it received public uproar, giving thousands of children sleepless nights, the BBC receiving a record number of complaints, putting some pregnant women into labour, and even causing one person to take their own life out of fear. I'm not saying that Mermaids the Body Found received no backlash, but I am pointing out that television networks in the US are so free and unregulated compared to that in the UK, that in contrast, this type of insane programming is almost deemed normal. The body parts and the audio recording come together to construct what one of these creatures apparently looks like. To the gullible viewer, this is the climax of every piece of evidence stated so far, and that not only are these creatures real, but they have found a real one.
Scientists aren't supposed to believe in fairy tales. And what we were looking at was a mermaid.
You thought that was crazy? Well, they go on to claim that all depictions of mermaids in mythology were actually depictions of real mermaids, because, of course, these creatures were everywhere in ancient times up to the Renaissance, then going into complete obscurity, only being visible in a handful of hilariously low-quality video clips like the one they show next. The documentary essentially ends with the evidence being brought to a lab, before being discredited and destroyed, which is incredibly convenient. They go on to blame the government for destroying the evidence for this creature in another conspiracy against the establishment. Many theories arise, such as the government keeping these creatures, or perhaps testing on them, before the whole 1 hour and 20 minutes finally concludes with, "Here is all the evidence, make what you will with it." Something that doesn't surprise me whatsoever. Throughout this video, I've made it look like Mermaids the Body Found was made purely to deceive audiences into believing in the aquatic ape theory, but in reality it's a piece of fiction, a mockumentary or docufiction, if you will. It's written drama, with all the officials and experts being paid actors. It's a story disguised as a piece of non-fictional programming. However, there is a part of me that truly believes Animal Planet wanted audiences to believe this was genuine. A Today article states that the network admitted in a press statement that the film is science fiction, using science as a springboard into imagination. Perhaps what Animal Planet needed for it to succeed was for their audience to imagine a world in which this was real. You'd think maybe given the press and media attention bringing light to Mermaids the Body Found being a hoax, they might try to forget it existed and move on. Except that's not exactly what happened. And it wasn't long until something even more horrible would emerge.
Next Sunday, and interview with Dr. Paul Robertson, where new evidence of mermaids will be revealed.
Oh my God!
Mermaids, the new evidence, next Sunday at 10, only on Animal Planet.